So what's up guys, welcome back to yet another video, and today we're taking a look at the Aorus Z590 Pro AX motherboard. Now this isn't something I've covered on the channel before, so this is a different kind of video, but yeah, we're going to be doing a short unboxing and overview of this motherboard, and we're going to be talking about who exactly this is for. So with that being said, before we get into it, a special thanks to Aorus for sponsoring today's video and sending the motherboard to me for making a video on. So yeah, I really appreciate it. With that being said, let's get into the video. So, starting off with the unboxing, right away you get the motherboard in some anti-static packaging. You take it out and it's a really nice motherboard, but for now I'm going to set it aside. Let's look at everything else that you get in the box. So first of all, you're going to be met with these two pieces of paper. First one is telling you to install the app center that you're going to need to install all of the drivers of the motherboard, and the other is a multilingual installation guide for those of you who need help in setting everything up for your new gaming PC. You also have this really nice looking manual. It's actually one of the nicest manuals that I've seen for a motherboard, and it basically guides you through exactly how to set up everything for the motherboard, from installing the processor and the RAM and every other cable that goes in to the software side of things. So yeah, pretty cool. And alongside that, you get this really cool sticker. You can put it wherever you want. I just think it's a really cool addition. And now onto the left compartment of the box. So right there you have your Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1 antenna that you can connect onto the back of your motherboard and put it on your chassis to connect your wireless devices. And alongside that, you also get this G connector, which I feel is a really nice addition, because from my personal experience, building your first PC can be very daunting, and it's actually the front I/O connections that are the most hard to get right, because you have to take a look at the manual. But you don't really have to do it for this motherboard, because it comes with this G connector. You can pretty much hook up every single corresponding wire to these specific headers, and they are labeled, so it's super simple. You just connect them all here and then put it directly into the motherboard, making it a really simplified process and easy to take in for first-time builders. I really like this addition. Alongside those, you also get a few M.2 screws for setting up M.2 drives out of the 4 slots that you have for your M.2 drives. We'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah, they include a few screws on this side. And now onto the right compartment. You find two interesting additions, and these are actually temperature readers that you can put in any part of your case and connect to your motherboard. You can pretty much get a constant reading of what temperature that specific part of the case is. So yeah, pretty cool. Not super important, but pretty cool. Going on from there, you get two SATA cables, and one of those sides is right angled, which I appreciate. That way it makes cable management a little bit cleaner, and it's for your 2.5-inch SSDs and your hard drive. You also get this 12-volt RGB extension, just in case your LEDs are a little bit too far from the motherboard headers. You can use this to get a proper connection. You get another couple of these M.2 screws. Now that we've taken a look at all of the doohickeys in the box, let's take a closer look at the motherboard. Now, the aesthetics of the motherboard is really good. I really like it. Most of it is metal, because a lot of these parts are actually heat sinks. The motherboard has a really nice design, and I really dig it. It looks great. Alright, so let's take a look at all of the connections on the motherboard. At the very bottom left, you have your front panel audio header. Alongside that, you find two RGB headers. One that's a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header, and the other one is a 4-pin 12-volt analog RGB header. There's also a TPM header. It has two USB 2.0 headers for connecting things like an RGB hub like a Commander Pro, or an AIO like the Waterforce X360, for example. Alongside that, you have your EC temperature header. This is basically where you connect those temperature probes. Going on from there, you have a Q flash button for flashing your BIOS. You have three 4-pin PWM fan headers. And beside that, you have the front panel I/O headers. And above that, you do have two Thunderbolt headers, but above that, you have your array of SATA ports to connect all of your hard drives and your SATA SSDs. And you also have a USB-C header. You also have another front panel USB 3.2 header, and above that you have another PWM fan header, and finally you have your 24-pin power connector for connecting your motherboard to the power supply. So yeah, above that you have two more RGB headers, one of them being a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB, and the other one being the 4-pin 12-volt analog RGB header. At the very top you find a CPU fan header for your CPU cooler, and you also find a CPU opt header for any AIOs that you might be adding to the motherboard. And at the left of the VRM on the top, you're going to find your 4-pin and your 8-pin EPS connectors for powering your CPU. And finally, there's another PWM fan header. So those are all of the connections on the board. Of course, you do have 4 RAM slots, and the maximum supported amount for this motherboard is 128 gigabytes of RAM. And you can also use unbuffered ECC memory, which I haven't seen in a lot of motherboards, but yeah, it is a cool addition. Other than that, there's the obvious fact that this is an 11th gen motherboard, so it has a LGA 1200 socket, so it's going to support your 10th gen processors as well as your 11th gen processors. And talking about this specific part of the motherboard, you actually have a very nice 12-phase VRM design. So the 12-phase VRM solution is actually powered by the ISL 99390s with a 90 amp power stage, which is actually really high quality, and it's great to see in this motherboard because a lot of other motherboards end up using 60 amp power stages, so 90 amps is definitely nice to see. And for these components, you do have adequate cooling given by these heat sinks at the side and the top, and both of these heat sinks are actually combined with a heat pipe so as to distribute the heat evenly. So yeah. Alright, now let's move on to the rear I/O. You're gonna find 4 USB 3.2 connections right at the top. You're also going to find 4 USB 2.0 connections. You also get another 4 USB 3.2 ports, and alongside that you have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. You do have DisplayPort over here, which is really nice to see, and you have USB-C at the back. And as for audio, you have 7.1 surround sound over here with SPDIF and optical out. So yeah, so definitely a really nice combination of ports at the back for connecting anything that you basically need to connect to the motherboard. Yeah, moving on from there, let's talk about the onboard features of this motherboard. Now, it does support PCIe Gen 4 via the X16 slot at the very top, and the other 2 PCIe slots are X8 and X4 respectively, both of which are Gen 3. Now, other than that, there's also the fact that this motherboard has a total of 4 M.2 SSD slots, which is really nice to see. And the first one is actually a Gen 4 connected directly to the processor. So yeah, the wires run straight to the processor, which is great for performance. It is an 80mm M.2 SSD slot. If you have a 110mm SSD, you're gonna have to use the 2 slots in the middle of the motherboard, but that's no biggie because those are also Gen 4. You do have 3 total Gen 4 SSD slots, and the last one at the very bottom is a Gen 3. Now, talking about the performance of this motherboard, it is a Z590 chipset, so it's great for overclocking your high-end processors like your i9 or your i7. It does have good VRM solutions. It has a good power phase design. So overclocking is definitely a doable thing on this motherboard. It is a Z590 chipset after all. So you definitely pair this with a nice i7 11700K or a i9 11900K and get good overclocks on those. Of course, this is a mid to high-end motherboard. The rear I/O solution is definitely really nice. It's definitely, in my opinion, rivaling a lot of high-end motherboards out there. You have your 4 M.2 slots, along with the fact that it supports up to 11th gen processors and does give a good amount of overclocking headroom for all of you performance freaks out there. So yeah, definitely a great motherboard pickup around that $300 price range. So if you're looking for a motherboard and you're a person that needs a good performance, so let's say you're 3D rendering, you're developing games, or you're an editor like I am, then definitely you're going to be getting an i7 or an i9 processor to meet your super demanding workloads, and this motherboard is definitely a great pickup to pair with that choice of processor should you go Team Intel. So yeah, a great motherboard overall with great port selection, a lot of headers, really good performance, good thermals in my opinion, and overall just a solid motherboard to pair with your new 11th gen i7 or i9 processors. And yeah, it's a pretty solid motherboard overall. It's definitely a really nice motherboard if you're looking to get a mid to high-end experience, and if you're looking for a good motherboard to pair with your high-end processor. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all you beautiful people in the next one. Goodbye!